South Carolina. Mr. Fry, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having this hearing today. I actually did a lot of work on civil asset forfeiture when I was in the State House in South Carolina. You know, it was amazing to me, as divided as this place is, as divided as Columbia can be at times. The bill that we filed was sponsored by 80% of the entire House of Representatives. You had conservatives lined up with liberals that really understood that this was a problem and that we needed to fix it. Civil asset forfeiture has really become a device for unjustified government takings. It's violative, oftentimes, in my view, of the 4th, 5th, 8th, and 14th Amendments. The problem that I have is that it doesn't have to accompany a charge. It's a totally separate mechanism. There's no due process, or very little. There's no judicial review, or very little. Whether or not it's excessive or not, there's no real protection for the individual. And as you pointed out, you have to go through this entire labyrinth here as a layperson, as a litigant yourself, to establish your innocence and to get your item back. And it's never within a timely manner. You know, many people are unaware of how the government or legal system really works until they find themselves in this exact spot. And as Ms. Scanlon pointed out, it's actually really interesting because a lot of these crimes or a lot of these seizures are less than $1,000. In South Carolina, 55% are less than $1,000. Nobody is gonna hire an attorney for that amount of money to go get their stuff back. They're just not going to do it. In instances within the district, since we were doing this, Miss Ella Bermel was a 72-year-old senior living in Conway, South Carolina. She owns a 1,000-square-foot home. She's had it for decades. She's not in the best neighborhood. And she did everything she could to get people off of her property when she was sleeping or at nighttime or when she was at work, because they would sell drugs at the corner by her house. And she put up no trespassing signs. She talked to other people in the neighborhood. She talked to parents. She talked to kids. She talked to the police. She even trimmed her bushes so that police could have a better vantage point of what was going on. And the city of Conway seized her home. She had to fight to get that back. It's very similar to what Ms. Scanlon was talking about earlier. Brandy Cook dropped off a friend at a Myrtle Beach sports bar as a favor. Drug enforcement agents swarmed the car in the parking lot. Because she was a waitress and didn't have a bank account, she had roughly $5,000 in her possession. Because her friend was wanted and she was unaware, they seized her money too. And it took really a very long time to get that back. This isn't a debate in my mind about pro or anti-police, really. It's really about process, right? Civil forfeiture is kind of based on the in rem jurisdiction that you can go seize the item, that the item committed the crime. It's not in personam, of course, which would be against the owner itself. You know, you look at these, Mr. Chairman, briefly, I want to introduce into the record with unanimous consent an investigatory series in 2019 from the Greenville News in the Anderson Independent Mail called Taken, which talks about civil asset forfeiture in South Carolina.
Without objection.
And another one, too, an opinion article by Andrew Yates on why South Carolina must end its civil asset forfeiture as well.
Without objection.
In this series, which is a massive investigatory series by the news, in 3 years, law enforcement seized $17 million. 20% of people who lost their property were never charged with an actual crime. Another 20% were charged but not convicted. The average time between seizure and when the prosecutor filed an action was 304 days, and 55% of cash seizures were less than $1,000. The problems, as you highlighted, really are everywhere. It's a separation of powers issue. It's a burden of proof issue. It removes the impartiality. Agencies now have a financial incentive to go do this and continue to do it. It doesn't protect innocent owners. It's not worth the fight to go against the government on small sums, as has been outlined. And of course, it's violative possibly of the 4th, 5th, 8th, and 14th Amendments. And of course, the preponderance of the evidence standard. I mean, these are all problems. Ms. West, have you encountered similar instances representing people who've lost either property or cash through civil forfeiture?
Yes, thank you. More, again, than we could possibly cover, even if this hearing was 3 hours longer. But one that comes to mind, just because you were talking about how long this can take and how long people can be deprived of their property in the civil forfeiture process, is we had a client who was traveling near the border to visit family in Mexico, and he was driving his Ford F-250 pickup truck, and CBP stopped him, and he didn't have any weapons in the car, but what he did have, he has a licensed firearm back home, and what he did have were 5 lone bullets in a console in his car. And CBP took his car because he was transporting munitions of war across the border. And after his property was taken and put into the forfeiture process, he went 2 years without ever having an opportunity to even have a hearing to contest the forfeiture and try to get his truck back. And that's obviously a huge problem because we see all the time, we have clients who, if you don't live in a place that has reliable public transportation, for example, if your car is taken away, that means you can't get your kid to school, you can't get to the grocery store, you can't get to your job. So this is a really serious problem, and these procedural defects really impact real people's lives.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back, and the chair